we are going to learn Halacha Dalet, the fourth Halacha. Let's see how many we can squeeze. Tov. Halacha Dalet. Here's another 5 things that will prevent you from doing Teshuvah. Ha'oseh otam en chezkato lashuv. If you do one of the next 5, most likely you're not going to be able to do Teshuvah on them. That's pretty discouraging. Now don't do these 5 things that we're about to learn. לפי שהם דברים קלים בעיני רוב האדם. Why most likely you're not going to do Teshuvah for them? Because in most people, they look at them like, what's the big deal? It's not even a sin. That's the problem. And that's why it's connected to the same chapter. You have to see the wisdom of Rambam. Not for by chance, he's connecting the halachot in the same chapter. Two halachot ago, what did we say? That the person doesn't like to be rebuked. And then if a person doesn't like to be rebuked, he's not going to do Teshuvah. Now he's saying, if you're going to do one of these 5 next ones that we're going to read, most likely you're not going to do Teshuvah because you don't think it's a sin. You're saying to yourself, what's the big deal? There's nothing wrong with that. And if somebody will come and tell you, that's going to be your reaction. So most likely you're not going to be able to do Teshuvah. Now let's see, what are they? If the things are easy, kalim be'enei rov adam, I don't take them seriously, nimtza choteh, what's going to happen? You will sin, yedameh she'en zachet, and you will imagine, that's not a sin. Ve'eluhen. Now let's see, what are these 5 things? Ha'ochel misuda she'ena maspeket leba'alea. That you eat from the food that belongs to another person, there will not be enough for that other person. So I'll give you an example. First of all, before the example, he says, Ze avak gezel. What is avak gezel? Shade of theft. Now, I'll give you an example, because a lot of people are saying, what do you mean, I'm eating from somebody else? Now, imagine now you walk into somebody's house, and the person is pretty poor. They don't have a lot of money. They're very, very tight. Now, he has a little portion of food for him, his wife, and his kids. And you're coming in and, oh, this looks pretty good. What is that? Well, that's stuffed mushrooms. Can I have one? And you start stuffing your face, not the mushroom. And you're eating, and the person is nice. He's not going to tell you, hello, that's our dinner. We only eat once a day. I don't have money. What are you eating my food? The person is nice. And you think you're just nibbling over the food, and the person is not going to tell you, that's my dinner. What are you doing? Now, some people will tell you straight out, hey, what are you doing? It's not yours. I don't have enough. But a normal individual will be like, okay. But what happens really? You're eating somebody else's food. He doesn't have. You have to have the common sense by saying, can I have a piece? Do you have enough? I'm very hungry myself. Can you spare a little bit? You have to have some common sense. Now what's the thing? Exactly what it says. You don't think it's a sin. But you just ate the food that belongs to somebody else and they don't have enough. Next. So first of all he says, שזה אבק גזל הוא, this is shade of theft, והוא מדמה שלא חטא, and you think to yourself, I didn't do any sin, כלום, אכלתי עליו ברשותו, he gave me permission to eat. Yeah, but he's a shy individual, he's not going to tell you he doesn't have enough. He's not going to tell you that that's all his food that he has. Now you ate from his portion. Next. המשתמש בעבותו של עני. This is a little bit hard to kind of understand. Avoto means a pledge or a collateral. Now when you're using the pledge of a poor person, שהאבות של העני אינו אלא כגון קרדום ומחרשה. What would be that pledge? Sometimes it can be an ox or a plow. Not an ox, an axe or a plow. Now how does that can be a collateral or a pledge? ויאמר בליבו, you say to yourself, אינם חסרים, והרי לא גזלתי אותו. Now sometimes a person is very, very poor, and I'm just going to give you one example out of many, because I can't think of too many examples, but imagine a person is not doing well financially, or he's very poor, and then it snows. He says, I'm going to shovel driveways, and I'm going to ask for some money. So here he's saying an axe or a plow, I'm going to use a shovel, okay? Now you took the poor person's shovel, and you're not stealing it, you're giving it back, and you're not chas v'shalom going to damage it, but you just took it to shovel your own driveway. Now you took it from the poor person. Now he can't make parnasa. And you're saying, what's the big deal? So I'll give it back to you in half an hour. Yeah, but I had an opportunity to shovel the neighbor's, what do you call it, the driveway, and now I lost the opportunity. So you're not allowed to do something like that. This is one example out of many. And he's using specifically on a poor person. Because sometimes the poor person, that's what he has. For you, it's not a big deal. You say, what's the big deal? You know, that's the attitude, what he's referring to. I'm going to use modern words. Because Rambam doesn't say, what's the big deal? I'm saying that. But it's for us to understand what he's trying to say. Because some things we totally discount them. What's the big deal? Why are you so uptight? Ma abaya? They say in Hebrew, Ma abaya shecha? What's your problem? I'm going to give it back in 2 minutes. But in your eyes, you're discounting the severity. And here, he says, this is something for a poor person. For him, it's a big thing. And what do you say to yourself? Enam chaserim. They didn't take from you. V'arei lo gazalti oto. I'm not stealing it, I'm giving it back. Yeah, but he lost the opportunity right now. Next. And again, you have to be a little bit broad in mind when you're learning Rambam. Rambam is very firm with what he's saying. You have to kind of dilute what he says and to say, okay, how can that relate with me? That's why I'm coming with the term of what's the big deal? Because we tend to discount things and to minimize things by saying, what's the big deal? So he's saying, yeah, it's a big deal. For you, it's not a big deal. For that person, it's a big deal, then you're going to have a problem. Next. Up until now, these are things that maybe don't relate with us. Now, number 3 will be very applicable to all of us. Hamistakel ba'arayot. When you're looking in a place, you're not allowed to look. In a place, arayot, the definition of what Rambam says is when you're looking at a woman that doesn't belong to you. You're not allowed to look at another woman. Right? This is what he means, mistakel ba'arayot. But nevertheless, it's also looking when you're looking at an inappropriate place. Why is he using the word arayot? Because to look in an inappropriate place, an immodest woman, naked woman, and so forth, that's also will be considered listakel ba'arayot. But he uses this term, I'll tell you in a second why. Ma'ale al da'ato she'en bekach klum. Why is he says mistakel ba'arayot, that you're looking at a woman that is not your wife? Because in your mind, you're like, what's the big deal? I'm just looking. What's wrong with looking? Right? That's what a person will say. But she's not your wife. I'm just looking. She has a nice dress. Well, it's not really a dress. It's a piece of cloth covering the tuchas. But what's the big deal? So why are you looking? You're not allowed to look there. Now, again, you're like, what's the big deal? I just looked for a few seconds. I was checking her out. Or in Hebrew, it says, "Lishtof ta'inayim." Let me just wash my eyes. I don't wash your eyes. This is not something for you to wash your eyes with. Now again, why is he saying mistakel ba'arayot? Shehu omer, because the person says to himself, "V'chi ba'alti ota." What? I went and had marital relations with her. I just looked. What's the big deal? Again, what's the big deal? Karavti etzla. I came to her and touched her, and I only looked. You know, in the secular world, you know, of course it happens also not so often in the religious world, but in the secular world, you go to a bar, you go to the beach, people look at your wife or your girlfriend. What are you looking at? You know, in the secular world, you're like, what, are you checking out my girlfriend? What are you looking at? And that can start a fight. So here he's saying, what's the big deal? But I only looked. Well, I'm not allowed to look. Now, why is it such a severe sin? Vehu eno yodea sheriyat ha'inayim avon gadol. When you're looking and you allowed yourself to look at another woman that you are married or she's married, it's a very big sin. He says avon gadol. Now, I told you already, we have chet and we have avon. Avon is a severe sin. Chet is by mistake. Chet, chatat, you did it by mistake, not knowing. Avon, you know exactly what it is and you did it deliberately and it's a severe sin. Why is that avon gadol? Shehi goremet legufan shel arayot. Because when you look, you know what happens? It motivates you to actually do the sin. So there's no, what's the big deal? Well, if you look in the wrong direction, and for you it's what's the big deal, then eventually the looking once, twice, 3 times would motivate you to sin in arayot, in forbidden relations. Shene'emar, excuse me, as it says, "V'lo taturu achei levavchem v'achei einechem." It says that we say that every day in Kriyat Shema. This can be found in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 15, verse Lamed Tet 39, where it says you should not follow your eyes or your heart. It's a sin. You're not allowed to look in the wrong places. So this is applicable to all of us, because you know what? We also have this in the back of my mind. What's the big deal? I just looked. Well, it's a big deal because you looked, you took a picture, your brain now has the image in your mind. Now that image is going to come and be knocking on your door. And now you're saying, what's the big deal? So you look here. What's the big deal? So you look there. And before you know it, you actually get to do forbidden relations, which is called arayot. That's why he uses the term mistakel ba'arayot. Next, number 4, hamitchabed bekalon chavero, a person that takes pride in others' shame. That's pretty disgusting. Omer bilibo she'eno choteh. Now, what do you say to yourself in your heart? Well, that's not a sin. What's the big deal? That's not a sin here. Again, what's the big deal? Lefi she'en chavero omed sham. You know why you say that's not a big deal? Because your friend is not really there. And I'm going to give you an example in a second. Velo higia lo boshet velo bisho. We learned a very similar halacha last week, but that's when your friend is next to him and you embarrass him in front of everybody and you now look like the cool guy. Here it's different because he's saying, my friend is not here. I'm not embarrassing him, but ela arach ma'asav hatovim v'chokhmato lemul ma'aseh chavero chokhmato. What am I doing? I'm coming and showing how my actions are so good, smart, and great that what it will make the other person look like a complete fool. He doesn't have to be there. But I'm doing that to show how bad your action is to make me look good. That's not cool. כדי שיראה מכללו שהוא מכובד. Why would a person do that? To show that I'm honorable, respectful, great, and so forth. וחברו בזוי. And the other person is בזוי means not worthy, not honorable, not respected, and so forth. That's not cool, and some people do it. Now, they're not going to come and embarrass you in front of everybody. They're just going to show a certain act that they did, and by default, you don't look good when you do that. I don't do that. And then you look like a great hero, and you make another person look bad. And that's also pretty common. And again, the same repetitive, what's the big deal? I didn't do anything wrong. Therefore, Rambam says, you're not going to do teshuvah, because you're a potz, in other words. Next, number 5. HaChoshed kesherim Omer belibo she'eno choteh. Some people, in Hebrew we say Rosh Haganav boer hakova. On the head of the thief, the hat will catch on fire. Some people, they suspect other people who did something, but the other person they suspect is a real kosher person. And I'll give you one example out of many. A person suspects, I think that rabbi is cheating on his wife with that woman. Excuse me? That's an honorable, respectful rabbi. He's not doing... No. I have a feeling something smells. You're suspecting somebody who's kosher? Now, you know why I said before that on the head of the thief, the hat will catch on fire? Because if you suspect on somebody, it means you know where the scent is coming from. So, what does that person say? Okay, so first of all, choshed kesherim, when I suspect a kosher person, he says kasher, but an honest, or I just gave an example with a rabbi. It can be a lawyer, it can be an accountant. I think that lawyer is a crook. No, he's an honest individual. Why you suspect? Now, what do you say to yourself? Ma asiti lo, what did I do? I only suspected him. What's the big deal? I didn't do anything. V'chi yesh shama ela chashad. But the question is there something to suspect here? Or are you just trying to make problems? Shema asa or lo asa, are you really suspecting whether the person did or not? And you don't know that this is a sin. You can't, you know how they say in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. Do not suspect somebody and just make up stories. When you're putting in your mind a person who's kosher as a person who's doing sins. Go check the facts first. Go collect some information. Don't just throw an assumption. And again, the same repetitive record. What's the big deal? I only said that I think he's a thief. Yeah, well, now you're taking a kosher, 100% good person, and you're saying something wrong about him. And again, the same thing with what's the big deal. So here we have 5 sins 5 acts that will prevent the person from becoming a Baal Teshuvah, because in your mind is, what's the big deal? So don't discount things, don't minimize things, and don't say to yourself, what's the big deal? And you know what, for you maybe it's not a big deal. That's what I always answer my kids. For you maybe it's not a big deal. For him it is. How many times kids, they fight between themselves, and one kid breaks the toy of the second kid, and the kid is now getting a tantrum, and the other one's like, what's the big deal? Just put it back together. Well, for you it's not a big deal. For them, they worked on it for hours. So don't discount other people's things, don't minimize things, because in your mind, if you think you're so good and you're minimizing things, eventually you will sin and you're not going to be able to do Teshuvah.